Hey guys, Ms. Hijik here with your Earth and Moon Objective 1 video on moon phases. If you haven't set up your Wix, please do so now. The objective, or the W, is to understand the moon sequences and predict patterns of change in shadows and the observable appearance of the moon over time. You have 6 essential questions and 1 support item that you need to make sure you complete. Pause the video now if you need some more time to set up your Wix. Otherwise, here we go. The force that governs the motion of the moon around the Earth is gravity. We have been talking about this force and talking about this force and talking about this force. Gravity is the force that governs the motion of many objects in our universe, and the moon revolving around the Earth is no different. So we do know that the moon is moving 1 to 2 centimeters away from the Earth each year. So eventually Earth's gravity will lose its ability to hold the moon in orbit. But that's going to be a long time from now. You guys don't have to worry about that. For now, the Earth's gravity keeps the moon in orbit, revolving around every 30 days. We call this a lunar cycle. The lunar cycle has 8 different moon phases, and there's 3.5 days between each phase. Now, a few things I want you to notice about this diagram. First of all, the sunlight is coming from the right-hand side, and you can see that the moon, this inner circle, is showing that the side of the moon that's facing the sun is always lit. 1/2 of the moon is always lit, and if we were out in space looking at the moon, we would see this. However, we are here on the Earth, and as the moon revolves around the Earth at 8 different places, I guess, within its revolution, the appearance of the moon changes because being here on Earth, looking at the moon in the sky, in these different positions, we see a, oops, goodness gracious, that's really sensitive. We see hold on, let me get my train of thought back. As the moon revolves around the Earth, we see a different amount of the moon being illuminated. Therefore, from our perspective on the Earth, we see a different shape of the moon as the moon revolves around the Earth. So the outer circle here is what we see when we're standing on the Earth from that perspective during the different 8 moon phases. So we start here in position 1 with the new moon. The new moon is when we're standing on the Earth and we look at the moon in the sky, and the whole part of the whole half of the moon that's facing the Earth, it's in shadow. And so we can't see any lit portion of the moon. So we look up in the sky and we really don't see a moon. We call it the new moon. From this point, though, the moon begins to grow or wax, and the moon grows from the right side. So when the moon is lit on the right side, regardless of how much of the right side is lit, we know that the moon is going through its growing phases or its waxing phases. The first growing phase is called the waxing crescent because just a sliver of the moon is now visible. As we sit on the Earth and we look up at the moon, we can see the half that's facing us, and just this little sliver over on the right-hand side is all we can see. And so this is the phase that we see the shape of the moon in the sky. The next moon phase is called the first quarter. Now guys, please do not call this a half moon. It is not a half moon. We call it a first quarter moon because the moon in this position is 1/4 of the way around its full lunar cycle. So as we sit on the Earth, again, we only see the half that's facing us, and so half of that half is actually lit up that we can see, and so we see this first quarter moon. The next phase is a waxing gibbous, where we have this bulging sort of illuminated side, but it's still the right side that's lit up, so it's a waxing phase, so the moon is still growing. And so here on the Earth, we look and we kind of divide the moon right there. We can see the half that's facing the sun, facing the Earth, and we see that more, like 3/4 almost, of the moon that's facing, the side of the moon that's facing the earth is lit up. And so we get this waxing gibbous in the sky. And so here we are, 1/2 of the way around the lunar cycle, and the entire half of the earth, the side that's facing, the whole half of the moon, the side that's facing the earth, is now lit up. So if we're here on the earth and we're looking out into the sky, we see now a full moon with that half, that side that's facing us, completely lit up. And from this point, the moon has gotten as big as it's going to get. And so now it's going to begin to shrink. And we call the shrinking phases waning phases. And during our waning phases, the left-hand side of the moon is lit up. So we have our next phase is the waning gibbous. Now the reason the left-hand side the left-hand side is lit up is now we're on the earth and we're looking back on the moon this way. Remember, we can only see the half that's facing us. So now from our perspective, it's the left-hand side that's lit up. And so here, more of the moon's surface is lit up than is in shadow. And so we get this waning gibbous phase. The next phase is the last quarter, not a half moon, but we call it the last quarter because we are now in the third quarter, which is another name for this. We call it the last quarter or the third quarter. Both are fine names. We can use those names interchangeable. So you may hear it as a last quarter, but you might also hear or see it as a third quarter. And so here we have the left-hand side lit up. So the side that's facing the earth, from our perspective, it's this left side that's lit up during a last quarter. And then we come into our final position, our position 8 right here, and the side of the moon that's facing the earth, you can see now that just a little sliver on the left-hand side is now visible from earth, and so we see this waning crescent shape in the sky. And then here we are again, back at our new moon. Now in terms of time, it takes about 3.5 days to go from one phase to another. So it takes 7 days or 1 week to get 1/4 of the way around, another 7 days or 2 weeks to get 2/4 or halfway around, and then 21 days or, oh goodness gracious, 21 days or 3 weeks to get 3/4 of the way around, and then about 28 days to get all the way around. That's 4 weeks, approximately 1 month to get all the way around the lunar cycle. Now, there is a limitation to this model, and that obviously is going to be our size. The moon is not the same size as the earth. And also, you may also see the sunlight over here shining on from the left-hand side. And so if you ever see a diagram with the sunlight on the left-hand side, then basically all of the positions just swap over to the other side. So we would have a new moon here, and then we would go around the same way. We would still go counterclockwise. So we would have our new moon over here, and then our waxing crescent, our first quarter, and then our waxing gibbous, and then our full moon, and then our waning gibbous, and then our last quarter, and then our waning crescent. And so when you're studying a diagram like this, please be sure you know which direction your sunlight is coming from, because that is going to make a difference as you are interpreting your picture. Why do we even see the moon? Well, the moon is an object in the sky that does not emit its own light. However, it does reflect light from the sun. So we can see the moon as a result of light that's being reflected from the sun, and the moon phase changes throughout the month because we see a different amount of reflected surface. Sometimes we see no reflected surface during a new moon. Sometimes we see just a little bit of reflected surface during a crescent. Sometimes we see half of a reflected surface during those quarter moons, or we see 3/4 of a reflected surface during the gibbous phases, or during the full moon, we see the full reflective surface of the side that's facing the earth. So what causes the dark side of the moon? Well, the dark side of the moon is the side or the half of the moon that faces away from us. And we don't ever see the dark side of the moon from Earth's perspective because of something known as a geosynchronous orbit, which I'll talk about in a second. First of all, or really, just know that the only people who have ever seen the dark side of the moon or ever will are astronauts that go out into space and they shoot around the moon's surface so that they can get back to the Earth. So if you want to see the dark side of the moon, become an astronaut. Fly out into space and you'll see that dark side. So why do we always see the same side of the moon? As I mentioned a second ago, it's something called geosynchronous orbit, and that's because the moon is not only revolving around the Earth every 28 to 30 days, but it's also revolving on an axis every 28 to 30 days. And so the timing or the rate of the rotation matching the rate of revolution causes us to see the same side of the moon, and that's why we never see the back side of the moon or the dark side. So why does the appearance of the moon change? Well, as that moon makes its way around the Earth, remember, half of it's always lit, but we don't always see the half that is lit. We only see a different, we see a different amount of light that is being illuminated. That's not really making a whole lot of sense, so let me rephrase. As the moon revolves around the Earth, the amount of reflected surface that we see from the Earth changes as its position changes. So guys, that's it for your essential questions, but don't forget to complete your action item. Your support item this time is to try and determine or predict what the moon phase will be on Thanksgiving Day. So whatever the moon phase is today, the day that you're watching your video, count forward the number of days to Thanksgiving and try and predict what moon phase you'll see on Thanksgiving. Until then, guys, I'm out.